Greetings, my dear viewer. This is a channel about marital infidelity and about the consequences if one spouse starts to cheat on the other. If you, as well as I do, support true family values and condemn cheating, then subscribe to the channel and give this video a like. Let's get started. Hey, I'm Sophia. The first time David kissed me, it was beneath the bleachers after football practice, a moment so intense that even now, I can still feel it. His hands, unsteady but gentle, framed my face, and the crisp scent of freshly cut grass clung to his practice jersey. That was 4 years ago. Back then, everything between us felt electric, overflowing with possibility. Now, at 21, I find myself more engrossed in my phone screen than in his company. The excitement that once defined us has faded into a routine so predictable, it barely feels real. Our Friday nights, once spent on spontaneous road trips in his beat-up Corolla, splitting a basket of fries at the all-night diner on 5th Street, or sneaking kisses in empty parking lots, have become evenings of silence, our faces lit only by our screens, the television droning in the background. Even our kisses feel mechanical, as though we're merely going through the motions of a relationship we no longer recognize. Last weekend, over coffee at our usual downtown cafe, I confided in Camila about how distant David and I had become. The air was rich with the scent of warm pastries, and the barista, familiar with our routine, had already started preparing our drinks, a vanilla latte for me, an Americano for her. As I absent-mindedly stirred my coffee, I admitted that even our movie nights had turned into long stretches of silence, punctuated only by endless scrolling. Camila, always one to be direct, tapped her manicured nails against her cup. "You need to shake things up," she suggested. "Have you ever thought about opening your relationship?" I nearly choked. "You mean seeing other people?" "Exactly. With boundaries, of course. Total honesty." My cousin tried it, and she swears it actually made her and her boyfriend appreciate each other more. The thought refused to leave my mind. That night, lying in my childhood bedroom, surrounded by old photographs of David and me, dressed for prom, celebrating his game-winning touchdown, I read article after article on open relationships until my eyes ached. The idea made sense. It wasn't about ending things, but about exploring possibilities without destroying what we had spent 3 years building. But getting David on board wouldn't be easy. Over the next week, I wove the idea into casual conversations, over lunch at the campus cafe, in the hallways between classes, curled up on his parents' couch. "We're only 21, I reasoned. "Shouldn't we see what else is out there before we make any big decisions?" His deep brown eyes clouded with uncertainty, but I kept pushing. Over slices of pizza at Mario's, our favorite spot since sophomore year, I painted a picture of adventure, of broadening our experiences while still holding on to each other. "This could make us stronger," I promised. "It doesn't mean we love each other any less." Last night, he finally relented. Sitting in his car outside my apartment, the streetlight casting soft shadows across his face, he let out a long breath and tapped his fingers against the steering wheel. "If this is what you really want," he murmured. Relief and excitement bubbled inside me as I leaned in and kissed him. "It'll be great," I assured him. "You'll see." But now, looking back, I wonder if I ignored the hesitation in his eyes, if I was too focused on what we could gain to realize what we might lose. Hey, I'm David. When Sophia first mentioned opening our relationship, I thought she was joking. We were in my basement, sprawled across the same worn-out couch where we'd spent countless nights since high school, the faint scent of my mom's fabric softener still clinging to the throw pillows. Everything felt normal, until she spoke. It was like someone had rewritten the rules of a game I thought I understood. I tried brushing it off, but she kept bringing it up. Over burgers at Danny's, where we'd been eating since we got our driver's licenses, she pressed the idea again. Our usual booth by the window felt strangely smaller that night. During our Wednesday study sessions at the library, her voice echoed between the quiet aisles. Not about assignments, but about freedom and new experiences. Even at her locker, where we used to swap gummy bears and joke about teachers, she was now slipping me links to articles about open relationships. Think about it logically, she urged, her voice taking on that persuasive edge she used when convincing me to sneak into that midnight horror movie junior year. We're too young to be tied down. Aren't you curious about what else is out there? But I wasn't. I liked the way we were. I liked our Friday movie nights, the way she took her coffee with vanilla creamer and no sugar, the way she stole my hoodies and conveniently forgot to return them. I didn't need anything else. The thought of her with someone else made my stomach knot. When I told Charles, my best friend, he didn't sugarcoat his thoughts. We were shooting hoops in his driveway, the rhythmic bounce of the ball filling the silence between words. Man, that's how relationships end, he warned, missing a three-pointer. Once you open that door, you can't close it. The ball rolled into the grass, forgotten. He told me about his cousin's failed attempt at an open relationship, but I barely heard him. All I could think about was the way Sophia's eyes had lit up when she talked about it, how I hadn't seen that spark in months when she looked at me. Even my parents noticed. My mom asked if something was wrong when I barely touched my dinner for the third night in a row. I wonder if she saw what I did, that something between us had already started slipping away. Dad always turned our weekend ritual of working on the car into an opportunity for life lessons. This time, his wisdom revolved around relationships. But how could I explain that the girl I'd spent years loving was ready to see other people? Every time Sophia brought it up, my resistance weakened, like watching a crack creep across a windshield. Subtle at first, then splintering beyond repair. Her logic had taken root in my mind, though I couldn't tell if it actually made sense or if I was just too drained to keep pushing back. Last night, I finally gave in. We sat in my car, parked in front of her house, the same spot where 2 years ago I had first whispered, "I love you." The streetlight caught the gold flecks in her green eyes as I swallowed the lump in my throat and forced out a single word. Okay. Her face lit up like I had just given her the world, but all I could think about was how ours was shifting. As she walked toward her door, a memory resurfaced, our first date at the carnival, when I'd been too nervous to hold her hand on the Ferris wheel. Now, I had just agreed to let her be with other people, and the thought twisted my stomach worse than any ride ever could. That night, lying in bed, I stared at our prom picture, her in a blue dress that matched my tie, both of us grinning like we had life figured out. Was this the beginning of the end? And if it was, had I just been too scared of losing her to say so? It's Sophia. Dating Alexander from accounting was effortless at first. Coffee breaks turned into shared lunches, which led to evenings spent together. He was polished, tailored shirts, sharp haircut, a cologne that lingered even after he left. It felt like stepping into the pages of a romance novel. No baggage, no complications, just raw attraction. Our first kiss happened under the dim lights of the parking garage. It wasn't like kissing David. Alexander was precise, controlled, self-assured in a way that made me feel more sophisticated, more grown up. When he invited me to his apartment, things unfolded quickly, like we were acting out a fast-paced scene from a movie. Everything was technically perfect, yet when I lay tangled in his silk sheets afterward, an unsettling emptiness settled inside me. That's when I started missing the little things about David. The way he'd absent-mindedly twirl my hair while we watched TV. How he always remembered to ask for extra pickles on my burger, even though he despised them. The way he laughed, genuinely, unrestrained, a sound I realized Alexander never made. Last week, during dinner at an upscale restaurant, I found myself glancing at my phone, hoping to see David's name. The meal was elegant, the kind of place David and I would have saved for special occasions, where we'd joke about the tiny portions and over-the-top descriptions on the menu. But with Alexander, it felt sterile, more like a business meeting with the added complication of intimacy. That's when it hit me. This wasn't freedom. It was loneliness masquerading as independence. Yesterday, I finally decided to tell David I wanted us to go back to the way things were. I planned it carefully. Our favorite spot by the lake, the golden light setting the scene like a moment from our favorite romantic films. "I think we should be exclusive again," I said, my heart pounding. His response shattered me. "I've actually been enjoying this," he admitted. "I've been seeing Camilla Miller." He hesitated, then continued. "And Jessica from chemistry, and Scarlett from Spanish club." Each name was a knife to the gut. These weren't just random girls. They were part of our history, girls who had been there when we fell in love, who had toasted us at prom. My stomach clenched as he kept talking. "They're not just casual flings," he said, his voice steady. "I've actually been connecting with them." The setting sun cast everything in a deep crimson as I sat there, feeling like the biggest fool alive. While I had been playing at being an independent, sophisticated woman, David had been building real relationships with people who understood where we came from. The jealousy was suffocating, pressing down on me like a tidal wave. I had assumed he was at home, waiting for me. Instead, he had learned how to live without me. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. He was supposed to be waiting, not moving on. "Hey, it's David again." When Sophia first suggested an open relationship, I thought it would be unbearable. The first few nights were brutal. I lay awake, picturing her with someone else, my stomach in knots. Then, out of nowhere, Camilla Miller sent me a message on Instagram. She wanted to grab coffee, catch up. I almost said no. She had always been in our friend group, but we'd never been close. Something made me say yes. Loneliness, curiosity, maybe both. We met at the old diner where Sophia and I used to hang out. Camilla was different from how I remembered, more self-assured, funnier. Conversation flowed effortlessly, hours slipping away as we talked about everything and nothing. She recalled details about me that Sophia had long since forgotten. My dream of restoring classic cars, my obsession with vinyl records. When she kissed me in the parking lot, it felt natural in a way I hadn't expected. Then there was Jessica from chemistry. A chance run-in at the library led to study sessions that turned into something more. She shared my love for obscure sci-fi novels, a passion Sophia had never quite understood. Suddenly, I wasn't just passing time until Sophia came back. I was discovering something real. And now, as she sat in front of me, asking to go back to the way things were, all I could think was, I don't want to. Scarlett from Spanish Club resurfaced in my life at a mutual friends gathering. Amid casual conversation, she suggested we practice our Spanish together. Our study sessions, however, often drifted into English, filled with discussions that uncovered parts of myself I had long buried. Each new connection in my life has illuminated something different within me. With Camilla, I rekindled long-forgotten passions. Jessica helped me embrace my quirks, showing me that my nerdy interests were not something to hide but to celebrate. And Scarlett? She listens in a way that makes me feel genuinely understood, something I hadn't realized I'd been missing. Since reconnecting with them, I've returned to the gym, joined a classic car restoration club, and picked up my old guitar again. The reflection in the mirror no longer belongs to the timid version of myself, the one who let Sophia dictate the course of our relationship. That person is gone. When Sophia called me yesterday, asking to meet at the lake in the sundress she knew I loved, I immediately understood her intentions. The old me would have seen this as an opportunity to fall back into our familiar dynamic without hesitation. But I'm no longer that person. When I mentioned Camilla, Jessica, and Scarlett, I saw the hurt in her eyes. She hadn't expected me to move on, to build something new without waiting for her return. A part of me wanted to reassure her, to slip into the role I once played, but I've grown too much to pretend. These relationships aren't fleeting diversions. They're meaningful bonds with people who accept me as I am now, not as the person I was in high school. The freedom Sophia once craved turned out to be something I needed too, something I refused to surrender. And then there's Sophia. I always assumed David would be a constant in my life, waiting while I explored my options. It never crossed my mind that he would be the one to move on first. Last night, I made one last attempt to repair what we had. I invited him over, back to the apartment that once felt like ours. I spent the entire day cleaning, arranging everything just the way he liked, even perfecting the only dish I ever truly mastered, his favorite pasta. As the air filled with the scent of garlic and basil, I hoped it would bring back memories of what we used to be. When he arrived, I barely recognized him. He carried himself differently, more confident, more assured. The nervous energy that once defined him had disappeared. His clothes were unfamiliar, his hair styled in a way that made him look older, more refined. He stood in my doorway, still David, yet not the David I had expected. "I've been thinking," I started, but my rehearsed words suddenly felt childish. "We made a mistake with the open relationship. We can fix this. I'll be more present, more appreciative. Let's start over." He didn't take a seat when I gestured for him to. Instead, he leaned against the counter, casual yet deliberate, signaling that he wasn't staying. The pasta remained untouched as he spoke. "Sophia," he said, his voice kind but firm, "you were right about one thing. We needed to grow. But you were wrong in thinking we had to come back to each other." He let out a slow breath, carefully choosing his words. "I've learned things about myself I never knew before. Camilla, Jessica, Scarlett. They're not just distractions. They've helped me understand what I truly want, what kind of relationship I deserve." A lump formed in my throat, but I refused to cry. "But we have history," I argued. 3 years, David. Everything we built. "History isn't a reason to go backward," he said gently. "You taught me that." And he was right. The open relationship had been my idea. I had pushed for space, for growth. I just never expected that growth to take him so far away from me. He straightened, preparing to leave, and I saw it, the undeniable transformation. He was no longer the man who once molded himself around my needs, who bent over backward to keep me happy. He had become someone new, someone I had inadvertently helped shape. "I've chosen to be with Camilla," he said, "exclusively. It wouldn't be fair to her, or to you, to pretend otherwise. Maybe it's best if we cut ties, a clean break." I sat motionless as he stepped toward the door. I wanted to stop him, to remind him of everything we had, every inside joke, every late-night conversation, every promise whispered in the dark. But the way he carried himself, steady and resolute, told me it would be pointless. The boy who once clung to my every word had become a man who knew exactly what he wanted. And it wasn't me. When the door shut behind him, I remained in the kitchen, surrounded by echoes of a past I could no longer reach. The photos on the fridge stared back at me, snapshots of a love I had let slip through my fingers. One by one, I took them down, each memory cutting deeper than the last. The hardest part isn't losing David. It's knowing that I was the architect of my own heartbreak. I pushed for an open relationship, convinced it would fix what was broken. Instead, it exposed a truth I wasn't prepared to face. David found his voice, his confidence, his independence. And I found myself alone, left with the shattered pieces of something I had destroyed with my own hands. They say to be careful what you wish for. I wished for freedom, adventure, change. And I got all three, just not in the way I had imagined. Now, as I sit in this silent apartment, staring at a plate of untouched pasta, I realize something I had been too blind to see before. Some changes cannot be undone. Once a door is opened, it doesn't always close again. And sometimes, the one who plays with fire is the one who gets burned the most. My friend, and this is the end of the story. If you liked this story, then put your royal like and subscribe to the channel. May the force be with you. Greetings, my dear viewer. This is a channel about marital infidelity and about the consequences if one spouse starts to cheat on the other. If you, as well as I do, support true family values and condemn cheating, Then subscribe to the channel and give this video a like. Let's get started. My name is Buck. I've always believed in hard work, responsibility, and loyalty to the people who matter. To me, a man's worth is measured by his actions, earning his place, honoring commitments, and standing by his word. But if there's one truth life has carved into me, it's this: placing your love in the wrong hands can destroy you. And I had to learn that lesson the painful way. This is how everything fell apart. When I met Jolyn, she was a widow struggling to raise 2 children on her own. William, a lively little boy of 4, zipped around the house with toy cars in hand, full of endless curiosity. Mallory, barely old enough to toddle, clung to her mother as if letting go would shatter her world. Their father, a soldier, had died in service, leaving behind a family that had to navigate life without him. He was a hero, but heroes don't come home. That left Jolyn bearing the weight of grief and survival alone. I saw how drained she was, a woman who had been through hell yet kept pushing forward. I didn't step in because anyone asked me to. I did it because I wanted to. I wanted to be a source of stability for those kids, to give them the father figure they lost, to ensure they never felt abandoned. And for years, that's exactly what I did. My job demanded long hours, but I never let it take me away from them. I made sure William and Mallory had the best: good schools, decent clothes, a warm home, and a full table every night. But it wasn't just about providing. I was there, present. Every school event, I was in the crowd, the loudest one cheering. Every birthday, I made sure their day was filled with laughter and cake. Every family trip, I gave them memories to carry for a lifetime. They didn't just call me Buck, they called me Dad, and I believed them. They loved me like I was their own blood, and I loved them the same. I thought I had everything a man could ever hope for. But life doesn't always let you hold on to the things you cherish. The shift came subtly at first: small, dismissive remarks, minor acts of defiance, nothing that seemed worth worrying over. I brushed it off. Kids go through phases, I told myself. But I had no idea what was coming. People warn you about teenagers. They push boundaries. They challenge authority. They act like they know it all. I was ready for that. What I wasn't ready for was how quickly everything I built would be torn down. By the time William hit 17, he became distant, staying out late, ignoring rules, disregarding my advice like it was meaningless. At 14, Mallory followed in his footsteps, mimicking his defiance. Simple requests to pick up after themselves went unanswered. Reminders about schoolwork were met with eye rolls and silence. I tried to talk to them, to keep that connection, but it was like speaking into the void. The more I tried to enforce boundaries, the harder they pushed. I wasn't asking for much, just basic respect. But to them, rules were oppression, and authority was something to reject. And the worst part? Whenever I turned to Jolyn for support, hoping she'd reinforce what I was saying, she stayed silent. At first, I made excuses. Maybe she was tired. Maybe she was just trying to avoid conflict. Maybe she was keeping the peace. But eventually, I saw the truth. This wasn't indifference. She was letting it happen. That should have been my wake-up call. Then came the night that changed everything. William had been coming home later and later. That night, he strolled in past midnight. No message, no explanation, like it was nothing. I wasn't shouting. I wasn't furious. I simply asked, "Where have you been?" I expected some level of guilt, maybe even a half-hearted apology. Instead, he scoffed and muttered, "Relax. I'm not a kid." I told him plainly, "You live under my roof. You follow my rules. If you can't respect that, we have a problem." He met my eyes with a cold, detached expression. "You're not my real dad. Stop acting like you own me." For a moment, time seemed to stand still. But before I could even process his words, Mallory, my sweet little Mallory, nodded and added, "Yeah, you're just some guy our mom married." I turned to Jolyn, waiting for her to step in, to correct them, to tell them they were out of line. She didn't. She just stood there, expression unreadable. No anger, no disappointment. Nothing. And in that moment, something inside me broke. After years of sacrifice, of giving them everything I had, I thought there had to be a limit to the disrespect I'd have to endure. But there wasn't. Just a few days later, it happened again. But this time, it wasn't just William mouthing off or Mallory jumping in to support him. This time, Jolynn decided to add her voice to the mix, and all of it over something ridiculously minor. Mallory had left the kitchen looking like a disaster zone. Dishes piled up in the sink, crumbs scattered across the counters, a sticky spill of juice congealing on the floor. I asked her, calmly, to clean up after herself. Just a basic expectation. But instead of moving, she met my eyes and shrugged. "Why don't you do it? It's your house, isn't it?" That hit me like a slap. Before I could even find the words to respond, William chimed in. "Why are you always acting like you're in charge? You're not even our real dad." And then, in a voice so casual it felt like a knife being twisted, Jolynn murmured, "They have a point, Buck." She didn't even bother to lift her eyes from her phone, didn't even glance in my direction. I can't explain exactly what changed in me at that moment. It wasn't just anger. It wasn't just hurt. It was something deeper. Clarity. That was the moment I knew I was done. That night, I sat alone in the dark, thinking about the years I had spent raising those kids, thinking about everything I had sacrificed for them, thinking about how, after all of it, I was still nothing more than an afterthought in their eyes. And if I meant nothing to them, then maybe it was time I started acting like it. So I did what I should have done a long time ago. I stopped. Stopped giving. Stopped caring. Stopped trying. No more rides to school. If they wanted to get there, they'd figure it out. No more allowances. I wasn't their personal ATM. No more stepping in to fix their problems. If they got into trouble, they'd deal with the consequences themselves. No more advice. No more guidance. No more fatherly concern. They didn't want me in that role? Fine. Let them see what life without me really looked like. And I won't pretend it didn't hurt, more than I can even put into words. But deep down, I knew it was the only way. Funny how some people don't realize what they have until it's gone. They assume they can treat you like nothing, and you'll just keep coming back for more. That was William, Mallory, and Jolynn. At first, when I pulled away, they thought it was a joke. They laughed, shrugged it off like it was no big deal. Good. Now we don't have to listen to him boss us around. Mom's got us. We don't need him. I overheard them saying that one day, and for a while they didn't feel the shift. Because Jolynn? Oh, she made sure to soften the blow. She kept the shopping sprees going, made sure their weekends were still filled with takeout and pointless spending. She reassured them they didn't need me. They laughed at me behind my back, smirked when I walked by, threw out little sarcastic remarks like I wasn't even there. I stayed quiet, though, because I knew something they didn't. Jolynn wasn't made of money, and I had been the one keeping this family afloat. So I waited. And then, slowly, everything started to unravel. At first, the changes were subtle. The shopping trips, fewer bags coming home, the fast food, less frequent, the brand new clothes. Suddenly, their closets weren't overflowing anymore. Then things got worse. School fees came due. Jolynn started stressing. William found himself in trouble at school. Normally, I would have stepped in, talked to the principal, taken care of it. Not this time. Mallory's phone broke. In the past, I would have replaced it in an instant. Not this time. And the biggest blow? No more Uber rides. They had to do something they never imagined. Take the bus. I'll never forget the morning William missed his ride. He assumed someone would step in to fix it. When he finally realized no one was coming, he had to sprint 3 blocks just to catch the city bus. Mallory complained to Jolynn, whining, "Why can't you just get us another ride?" And Jolynn, frustrated and overwhelmed, snapped back, "Because I don't have the money for that right now." The moment I heard that, I smiled. Reality had finally set in. It took about a month before Jolynn cracked. One night, I came home from work to find her waiting in the kitchen, arms crossed, face red, ready for a fight. "You're acting like a damn child, Buck. What kind of man punishes his own family just because his feelings are hurt? You're neglecting your responsibilities." I just stood there, staring at her. Because there it was, that word, responsibilities. Not love, not family, not respect. No, I wasn't a husband. I wasn't a father. I was just an obligation, a paycheck. So I met her eyes and asked her, plain and simple, "Why do you never stand up for me? Why do you always let them treat me like this?" And that's when she faltered. She sneered, her voice laced with contempt. "Because I agree with them, Buck. You were never really their father." A cold sensation spread through me, chilling something deep inside. But she wasn't finished. "I told them not to let you control them. I had raised them before she came into the picture. I could do it again. I should have felt anger, maybe even sorrow. But what filled my chest instead? Relief. Finally, she had said it outright. At last, the truth stood bare. I had never truly been their father, never her partner, just a provider, a convenient source of income. William and Mallory stood nearby, arms crossed, satisfaction written all over their faces. This was it. This was who they really were. I gave a slow nod, turned on my heel, and walked away. Not in defeat, but in resolution. I had always believed that when someone shows you their true nature, you should believe them. And now, I had no choice. The change was immediate. Once the financial support stopped, their hostility intensified. Things escalated in the following days. My belongings began to disappear. Important work documents, carefully arranged on my desk, were suddenly missing when I needed them most. My car, parked safely in the driveway, was vandalized overnight, deep scratches running the length of the driver's side. At first, I dismissed the idea that they were responsible. But the breaking point came when I arrived home one evening to find my closet ransacked, my clothes shredded, strewn across the floor. That's when I checked the security footage, and there they were, William and Mallory, laughing as they tore through my things. For weeks, I pretended nothing had changed. I let them believe they had won, that their cruelty had pushed me into silence. I remained distant, detached, seemingly unaffected, even as they escalated their efforts to provoke me. But behind closed doors, I was preparing. I documented every incident, the threats, the hateful messages, the destruction they left in their wake. I gathered proof, making sure there would be no question about what I had endured. Quietly, I set my exit into motion. I met with a lawyer, laid everything out, and handed over the evidence I had collected, the intimidation, the damage, the toxic environment. My lawyer assured me I had a strong case for divorce. Given the circumstances, I could even seek a restraining order if necessary. It wouldn't be immediate. These things took time. Weeks of meetings, paperwork, and filings lay ahead. I formally reported the damages to the police. They weren't about to make arrests over destroyed property, but the documented threats only strengthened my case. And then, when everything was in place, I left an envelope on the kitchen counter before heading to work. Inside, Jolynn would find the divorce papers. At first, she probably thought it was a bluff. But then the calls began. Her tone fluctuated between fury and desperation. When the next set of documents arrived, panic crept into her voice. Attached to the divorce filings were police reports, records of threats, and photographic proof of the destruction. My lawyer had insisted on including them, to shield me from any lies she might attempt to spin. I didn't answer her calls. By that time, I had already moved out, taking only what mattered. The joint accounts were closed, the money she assumed she could still access, gone. Everything had been in my name, and I had ensured she had no legal claim to any of it. Now, she was truly alone. When Jolynn realized I wasn't going to respond, the texts poured in. At first, they dripped with anger and blame. "You're a coward, Buck. The moment things got tough, you ran. You were never a real man. A real father wouldn't abandon his family. I don't need you. I can take care of my kids just fine." The irony was almost laughable. This was the same woman who had encouraged those same kids to push me away, to treat me like an outsider in my own home. And now, she wanted to paint me as the one who had abandoned them? In reality, they had discarded me first. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. Weeks passed, then months. The messages from Jolynn grew less frequent, most likely because she was finally facing reality. She was truly on her own. No more financial safety net, no more easy life. She had always bragged about managing without me, but deep down, I had always known the truth. She had built her life on the foundation I provided, and now, without me, that foundation was crumbling. Then, unexpectedly, the messages changed. This time, they weren't from Jolynn. They were from the kids. The first was brief. "Hey, can we talk?" I ignored it. A few days later, another followed. "I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but things aren't great right now." Still, I remained silent. Then Mallory reached out. "Hey, Buck, just wanted to say I hope you're doing okay." I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. But I didn't type a reply. The messages kept coming, slow at first, then more frequent. And gradually, the tone began to shift. At first, it was nothing more than an attempt to fill the silence, a hesitant effort to piece together what had shattered. But soon, every syllable carried the weight of regret. All I wanted was to apologize, to admit that we had failed you, that you deserved far better than what you were given. Since you left, everything has felt different. Mom is struggling. And then there was that message, the one that almost made me laugh. "I miss you." It lingered on the screen, untouched, ignored. I never answered. I never even acknowledged it. Because for the first time in my life, I was free. If this entire experience has taught me anything, it's that you should never allow yourself to be an afterthought. Never beg for respect. Never exhaust yourself proving your worth to those who refuse to see it. And most importantly, the moment you realize you're being used, you leave. Because some people only understand what you meant to them when you're no longer there. By then, it's already too late. Walking away from Jolynn and the kids was the hardest thing I've ever done. Not because I wanted to hold on to them, but because I had spent years convincing myself that I needed to. That being a good man meant enduring disrespect. That love demanded sacrificing my dignity. I was wrong. A man who truly knows his worth doesn't remain where he isn't valued. Now, I live for myself. I dedicate my time to my career, my goals, and my own happiness. I surround myself with those who genuinely care. I've reconnected with old friends. I've traveled. I've explored passions I once ignored. I no longer wake up bracing for the chaos of another day. I wake up with peace, with clarity. And that, my friends, is how I reclaimed my life. My friend, and this is the end of the story. If you liked this story, then put your royal like and subscribe to the channel. May the force be with you.